My name is Emma Carter. I'm 28, and this morning I kissed my husband's cold forehead and told him goodbye, while machines hummed softly in the background and nurses walked past me like I didn't exist. But the moment that broke me wasn't the farewell itself. It was what I heard 3 steps down the hallway. Just behind the half-drawn curtain, Nurse Rachel leaned toward another nurse and whispered, "She doesn't suspect a thing about the meds." And the other nurse replied, low and careful, "She's leaving now. It's almost time." I stopped breathing. Everything in me wanted to keep walking, but something, I don't know what, froze me right there in the hallway, my hand still damp from Daniel's. Their voices echoed behind the curtain like they were bleeding through the walls. Good. The dosage is set. What dosage? What didn't I suspect? The fluorescent lights above flickered once, then held steady. I remember because I looked up, like maybe the ceiling would give me some answer, but it didn't. Neither did the smell of antiseptic or the faint beeping of someone else's monitor down the hall. Just 5 minutes earlier, I was whispering, "I love you," into Daniel's ear, trying not to shake as I did it. His hand had felt like paper, thin and cold, like he was already half gone. The skin around his eyes was purpled, sunken. His breaths were shallow, every rise of his chest a negotiation with something invisible and unrelenting. The doctors had told me he wouldn't make it through the month. They said it with that same neutral calm they all use, polished and practiced and completely disconnected from the lives they're casually shattering. So I'd come to say goodbye. I'd held his hand. I'd kissed his forehead, and I'd made myself walk away. But now I couldn't move, because something about those words, "She doesn't suspect," and "the dosage is set," didn't feel like harmless medical talk. They felt like something sharp, wrapped in silk, like poison whispered through a smile. I pressed my back against the cool wall beside the curtain, tried to breathe, tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. Was I imagining things? Daniel's illness was real, wasn't it? He'd been diagnosed 9 months ago. Neurological failure, rapid decline. They used long words and printed charts and even showed us scans, white smudges on grayed brain images that looked like ghosts in fog. We'd both cried in the parking lot after that appointment. That was real. But now I wasn't sure of anything. Not after what I heard. My fingers curled around the strap of my purse. I held it tighter than I meant to, like gripping that bag was the only thing keeping me upright. And then, just for a second, I heard the soft rustle of their uniforms behind the curtain and Rachel's voice again, this time lighter, almost amused. "She's always so polite, like she has any idea." The other nurse chuckled. My cheeks flushed with heat. I took a step back. The floor beneath me felt too smooth, like I might slip and fall through it. I turned and walked, slow at first, then faster, until I hit the elevator and jabbed the G button like it had done something to me. The doors closed. The hum of descent filled the space. My reflection in the mirrored panel stared back at me, pale, shell-shocked, and sweating despite the air conditioning. What had I just overheard? What if Daniel wasn't just dying? What if someone wanted him to? Before we dive deeper, please leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe to our channel. Join our community of resilient women sharing stories of strength. Outside, the morning sun was too bright, the air too clean. Everything looked wrong, like the world hadn't caught up to the weight of what I'd just heard. I walked across the parking lot like a ghost. My car keys felt unfamiliar in my hand. The bakery could wait. Everything could wait. Because now there was a question in my chest that wouldn't leave me alone. What were they doing to my husband? It hit me all at once, the wrongness of it, the subtle shifts over the past few months. The times Daniel seemed dazed, even when the doctors said he should be lucid. The sudden drops in energy, the bruises on his arms that no one could explain. I'd ask questions. I always ask questions, but they always had answers. Polite, practiced ones, medical jargon. Nurse smiles, doctor nods, nothing that stuck. But now I couldn't stop hearing that voice. "She doesn't suspect a thing about the meds." And maybe that's when something in me cracked. Because if I didn't suspect anything, if I really didn't see this coming, then what kind of wife was I? I should have known. The bakery had been my whole world for years. Carter's Crumbs. It was my first child before I even knew if I wanted kids. Built from scratch, literally. One oven, one shop, one sleepless night after another until it became a chain worth almost $10 million. But Daniel had been my heart. And now I wasn't even sure if I'd said goodbye to a dying man or if I'd walked away while someone waited to finish what they started. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I sat in the driver's seat of my car with the engine off, watching the sliding doors of Willow Creek Clinic open and close, watching people step in and out, smiling, carrying flowers, holding hands, normal people with normal lives. And me? I was sitting there wondering if my husband was being slowly poisoned. A tap on my window made me jump. I turned, heart racing, but it was no one. Just the branch of a tree brushing the glass, pushed by the August breeze. Still, it took me a full minute to unclench my jaw. It's funny. I used to think betrayal was loud, like screaming fights or slammed doors, but now I know the worst kind is quiet. Whispered, hidden behind curtains and sterile hallways and words like dosage and she doesn't know. I took out my phone. I didn't know who I was going to call, maybe Ava, my cousin. She was interning at the clinic for the summer. Maybe she'd know something, or maybe she'd tell me I was being paranoid. But even if I was wrong, I needed to find out. I opened my contacts, hovered over her name, and then I saw it, on the rearview mirror. 2 nurses stepping outside the clinic's employee entrance, Rachel Hayes, and the same one who'd whispered back to her. They didn't see me, but they were laughing, and I knew in that moment I wasn't imagining it. Something was very wrong, and I was going to find out what. But first, I needed to ask myself one terrifying question. If someone was trying to hurt Daniel, who else might be helping them? The bell over the bakery door jingled, too cheerful for what I knew was coming. I recognized the rhythm of those heels before I even looked up. Click, click, pause, like punctuation marks in a sentence I'd read too many times before. Sophie. She breezed into the back office like she owned the place, like Carter's Crumbs was just another notch on her designer belt. Her coat was a winter white trench, tied perfectly at the waist. Her lips were painted that cold shade of red she always wore when she wanted something. Trailing behind her like a shadow was Liam. He didn't look at me right away. His eyes went to the bookshelf, the window, anything but my face. "Emma," Sophie said, voice clipped, eyes already scanning the ledgers on my desk. "We need to talk." I gestured to the chairs across from me, though I felt my spine stiffen like someone had pulled a string through it. They didn't sit. "We'll be quick," she added. "This won't take long." It never did. Not when it was about money. I folded the ledger shut and leaned back. "What's going on?" Sophie reached into her handbag, red leather, probably $3,000, and pulled out a crisp folder. "We have a business proposal, time-sensitive, urgent, actually." Liam finally looked at me, his face drawn. "We need $300,000. The number hit me like cold water to the chest. I blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's an investment," Sophie rushed in, "for a second round of funding. Our startup's about to scale, but we need liquidity now or we'll lose our stake." I stared at her. At the perfect part in her hair, the diamond studs in her ears, the flawless confidence of someone who had never once been told no. "You've seen Carter's Crumbs numbers," she continued, setting the folder on my desk like a final chess move. "You're sitting on millions. You can help us." The smell of cinnamon and fresh bread still hung in the air, but suddenly it made me feel sick, like even my own bakery was suffocating me. "Help you?" I asked softly. Liam finally sat down, elbows on his knees, hands clasped tightly. "Come on, Em. It's family." I looked at him, really looked, and saw the desperation he was trying to hide. The kind that sits in your gut and chews slowly. "And if I don't?" I said. Sophie's smile faltered for a second, just long enough to show the steel beneath it. "Then we'll be ruined." It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. I opened the folder. Printed slides, mock-ups, a 5-year projection built on sand and buzzwords. Blockchain. Crypto-aligned? AI integrated? There was nothing solid here. No clients, no contracts, no structure. Just desperation in pretty font. "I built Carter's Crumbs from nothing," I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. One oven, one shop, one customer at a time. No investors, no handouts, just me and early mornings and burned fingers. Sophie rolled her eyes. God, you love that speech. I snapped the folder shut. She froze. You think because Daniel's in that hospital bed, I'm vulnerable, I said. You think grief makes me soft. It doesn't. The room shifted. A cold silence spread between us, settling on the walls like frost. Liam shifted in his seat. We wouldn't ask if we weren't desperate. I know, I said. That's what scares me. Sophie leaned forward. Her perfume was expensive and sharp. This isn't just about us. It's about legacy. Daniel's legacy, his family. Don't you want to protect that? There it was, the twist of the knife. I looked at her, at the glossy hair and manicured nails, and for the first time, I wondered if she even visited him, or if she just saw him as an opportunity, a door she could kick down with the right amount of pressure. I pushed the folder back across the desk. No. Her hand didn't move to take it. She just stared at me like she didn't understand the word. What did you say? She asked. I said no. Liam stood. Emma, come on. You don't need all that money. You've got more than enough. And I earned every dollar. Sophie's face changed then, like a switch had been flipped. The warmth vanished. Her jaw clenched. Her voice dropped an octave. You're being selfish. I laughed, dry and sharp. You're calling me selfish. You're hoarding wealth while your own family is drowning, she snapped. You think baking cookies makes you better than us? No, I said, standing too. I think work makes me better than you. The moment stretched, tight as piano wire. You'll regret this, she said. I met her stare. I already do. They left in silence, but the scent of her perfume stayed behind, like smoke after a fire. I stood there, alone, the folder still sitting on my desk. And then I saw it, just for a moment. When Sophie turned back toward the door to leave, her eyes flicked to the stack of ledgers. It was a quick glance, too fast for most people to notice. But I did. And it wasn't just curiosity. It was calculation. What was she looking for? I walked over and locked the office drawer where I kept backup statements and property deeds. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from recognition. That wasn't just an ask. It was a warning shot. I sat down slowly, palms pressed flat against the desk. Sophie had always been manipulative, dramatic, entitled, always playing the victim. But this was different. There was an edge to her today that didn't feel like desperation. It felt like planning. And Daniel, if he was being poisoned or manipulated or worse, what if she knew? What if this whole thing, this startup, this sudden need for cash, was just one layer? I remembered the nurse's whisper. She doesn't suspect a thing about the meds. And Sophie's eyes, so quick on those ledgers. My gut twisted. What if she was after more than just money? What if she was after everything? The bell over the door rang again. I didn't move. A delivery guy called out from the front, but I barely heard him. Because in that moment I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to consider until now. What if Daniel wasn't the only one they were trying to break? What if I was next? The porch light flickered as I stepped out, clutching my coffee in both hands. The ceramic mug burned against my palms, but I welcomed the sting. It grounded me, reminded me I was awake, alive, still standing. But as I turned the corner, my breath caught in my throat. The word greedy was spray-painted across my white front door in jagged red letters, bright and wet, dripping like fresh blood. My mailbox lay shattered in pieces on the lawn, its post cracked down the middle like a snapped bone. I stood frozen at the top of the steps, unable to move. This wasn't random. This wasn't kids playing a prank. This was personal. My eyes scanned the street, empty, silent. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I could hear a dog barking a few houses down, the low hum of sprinklers kicking on, but nothing else. The paint fumes clung to the air, bitter and metallic. I walked slowly to the edge of the porch, the wooden boards creaking beneath my feet. Footprints. Mud-tracked prints crushed the tulips beside the path, heavy, careless steps. Someone had been here, someone who didn't care what they destroyed. I crouched, one hand brushing the petals of a crushed flower. My pulse thudded in my ears. My mouth was dry. Why now? Why this? Was it about the money? The rejection? Or was this something else? A door opened next door. Emma? Clara Evans stood on her porch in her robe, holding a steaming mug of tea. Her gray hair was pulled back, her expression sharp behind her wire-frame glasses. I didn't answer right away. My throat felt like it was closing up. She stepped closer, careful across the dew-slit grass. "Oh my God, who did this?" I shook my head. "I don't know." She looked at the door, then the mailbox, then back at me. "This wasn't random." "I know." "I heard a car," she said, voice lower now. "Around 3 a.m., engine idling too long to be normal. I almost went to check, but—" She didn't have to finish the sentence. She was 70 and lived alone. Of course she hadn't come outside in the dark. I think it was a dark sedan, not one I recognized from the neighborhood. A cold weight settled in my chest. Liam drove a black sedan. Sophie had access to it. But no, I couldn't go there. Not yet, not without proof. Still, I felt the pieces shift in my head, rearranging themselves into a shape I didn't like. "I'll call the police," I murmured. Clara reached out, gently touched my elbow. "I'll be a witness if you need one." I nodded, grateful. "Thank you." She hesitated. "Emma, do you think this has to do with Daniel?" I blinked. The thought hadn't come from nowhere. It had been crawling in the back of my mind for days now, but hearing it aloud made my stomach twist. "I don't know what to think anymore," I said. After she left, I stood alone on the lawn, arms wrapped around myself, as the morning light spilled across the wreckage. A neighbor jogged by with headphones in, gave me a glance, then kept moving. The world didn't stop just because yours was breaking. I called it in. The officer who arrived was young, polite, but I could see it in her eyes. The quiet judgment. Another domestic squabble gone public. Another wealthy woman getting her door tagged. But I wasn't interested in what she thought. I just wanted it on record. And I wanted the next attack to be harder to explain away. After she left, I cleaned what I could. The mailbox was gone for now, but I scrubbed the worst of the paint off the door. My hands were red and raw by the time I finished, even through gloves. The word still lingered faintly, like a ghost. I stood back and looked at it. That one word, greedy. It was laughable, if they only knew. My first apartment had been above the bakery, tiny, hot, and always smelling of yeast and sugar. I hadn't taken a paycheck for the first 14 months. Every cent had gone into rent, flour, and the busted oven I prayed over nightly. And now they wanted to call me greedy? The word pulsed in my brain as I sat on the porch staring at the street. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Hope you're okay. Saw something on the neighborhood page about vandalism. That's awful. Let me know if you need anything." I read it twice. The emoji felt like a slap. I didn't reply. Later that afternoon, I replaced the lock on my front door. I scheduled a new security system install for the end of the week. I even picked up a trail cam and set it discreetly behind a flower pot on the porch. If they came back, I'd catch them. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. That night, I double-checked the locks, drew the curtains, and tried to sleep. But every creak made my muscles tense. At 2:17 a.m., I woke up with my heart pounding. Nothing had happened. No new noise. Just that creeping dread that slides under the skin and whispers, "They're not done." The next morning, I found boot prints in the soft dirt near my side window. Deep. Fresh. My hands trembled as I took pictures, and just when I thought it couldn't get worse, my phone buzzed again. Another message. This one from an unknown number. "You should have said yes." I stared at it for a long time, my fingers cold and stiff around the phone. And for the first time since Daniel's diagnosis, I felt afraid in my own home. The sun had barely broken over the rooftops when I unlocked the front door of Carter's Crumbs. The bell above jingled like always, warm and familiar, but my shoulders didn't drop the way they usually did. I didn't feel safe here anymore, not after the paint, the broken mailbox, the message on my phone. My fingers trembled slightly as I turned on the lights. The bakery smelled like butter and cinnamon, but something else hung in the air today. Unease, thick and sour, like overproofed dough. I walked toward the counter, set down my purse, and grabbed the to-do clipboard. Then I saw it, a folded piece of paper, half tucked under the doorframe, crisp, white, and placed like someone wanted me to see it. My stomach knotted. I picked it up with slow fingers, turned it over. No name, no handwriting on the front, just weight. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might shatter in my hands. 4 words. Check Daniel's meds. Underneath, scribbled in smaller letters. You're not safe. I read it 3 times. Each time it felt colder. My mouth went dry. I looked around the shop, suddenly aware of how exposed I was. Floor-to-ceiling glass windows, no cameras yet, every light a spotlight. I locked the front door. Then I sat down on the stool behind the register and read the note again. It couldn't be random. Whoever wrote this knew something. The memory of that nurse's whisper slammed back into my chest like a fist. She doesn't suspect a thing about the meds. I didn't just suspect now. I knew something was wrong. But this note wasn't a threat. It was a warning. I pulled out my phone and dialed the Willow Creek Clinic. Reception picked up after 2 rings. Hi, yes, this is Emma Carter. My husband Daniel Carter is a patient there. I just wanted to ask about some recent test results. There was a pause, some typing. Then, yes, I see him here. Is there something specific you're looking for? I gripped the phone tighter. His diagnosis. Has anything changed recently? I'm not allowed to share detailed medical information over the phone, but I can see his chart has some inconsistencies. One moment, I'll flag it for review. Inconsistencies? My heart lurched. What does that mean? I'm not medically trained, ma'am. I just log files. But there are duplicate entries from different doctors. Looks like conflicting notes on medication. I'll notify his attending. She sounded casual, disconnected, like she was reading lunch orders instead of my husband's fate. Thank you, I said, barely managing the words. I hung up. My chest felt tight, my breath short. Conflicting notes? How does that happen in a place built to heal people? I stared at the note again, my eyes burning. Check Daniel's meds. I thought of the slow fade in his eyes, the slurred speech the doctors had blamed on progression, the way he used to be able to lift his coffee cup until he couldn't. What if it wasn't just the disease? What if someone was helping it along? And now, apparently, I wasn't safe either. I heard the back door click open. My heart jumped. I grabbed the nearest object, a rolling pin, and stood behind the counter, breath caught in my throat. But it was just Mia, my assistant manager. She stepped in, earbuds in, half dancing to whatever was playing on her phone. She froze when she saw my face. Whoa, Emma, are you okay? I forced a breath, set the rolling pin down. Yeah, just rough night. She studied me a second longer, then nodded. You want me to open today? You look like you need air. I nodded, grateful. Yeah, that'd be great. I left through the back without another word. Outside, the sky was brightening, but everything felt dim, like I was moving through molasses. I sat in my car and stared at the steering wheel. The note was in my lap, now folded again, corners creased. Who had written it? Someone inside the clinic? Someone who knew Sophie? Someone who'd seen too much? And why warn me? That question spun in my head as I drove home, gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. Back at the house, the air felt different. Stale. Still. I checked every lock again, every window. Then I stood in the middle of the kitchen, the note on the counter, and tried to think. If someone had tampered with Daniel's meds, what was their goal? Mercy? Control? Or something darker? My phone buzzed again. This time it was Ava, my cousin. Hey, just checking on you. Heard from Mom about the vandalism. Want me to drop by? I stared at her name. Ava, 19, sharp, heart too big for her own good, studying to be a nurse, interning at the very same clinic. A terrible idea slid into my brain like a sliver of glass. What if she knew something? Or worse, what if she was involved? I hated myself for even thinking it. But this was the same place where I'd heard those whispers, where Daniel was dying slower than he should, where someone left a note telling me I wasn't safe. I stared at her message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, and then, against every instinct that screamed no, I typed back, "Can we talk? Meet me at the cafe at 5?" Her reply was instant. "Of course. Everything okay?" I stared at the screen for a long time before I responded, not even close. The cafe was quiet when I got there, the air thick with the scent of ground espresso and sugar-dusted croissants. I chose a table near the back, away from the windows. somewhere I could watch the door, somewhere I could think. I stirred a cup of chamomile tea I hadn't ordered just to keep my hands busy. The spoon clinked gently against the ceramic over and over until I caught myself and stopped. Then I saw her, Ava. She slipped in wearing a hoodie 2 sizes too big, a ponytail pulled through the back of a baseball cap, eyes darting like she was expecting someone to grab her by the arm and drag her back. She saw me, and her shoulders dropped slightly. She walked fast, like the ground was too hot under her feet. "Emma," she said, sitting across from me, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to say at first. I just watched her. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she fidgeted with the zipper on her hoodie. This wasn't the same bright-eyed nursing student who brought cupcakes to the bakery on her first day interning at the clinic. This was someone who'd seen something she couldn't unsee. "Did you leave that note?" I asked. Ava's eyes widened. "No, but I know who did." I leaned in. "Who?" She glanced around. No one was close enough to hear. She lowered her voice anyway. "Rachel Hayes, the nurse. She swallowed hard. She's been switching Daniel's meds." My blood went still. "I saw her," Ava whispered. 2 nights ago. She pulled one of the vials from her own bag. It wasn't labeled right. It wasn't on the chart. When I asked her, she just smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's approved." But I checked. It wasn't. It's not even on the clinic's inventory list. The cafe fell away. The chatter, the clink of forks, the smell of sugar, it all blurred into nothing. "What kind of medication?" I asked, throat dry. "I don't know for sure," Ava said, "but it sedates, slows things down. I saw Daniel the next morning. He couldn't hold a spoon. He was confused, more than usual. His motor functions dropped fast." I gripped the edge of the table. "Why would she do that?" Ava hesitated. "I think she's being paid." My head whipped up. "By who?" Her eyes met mine. "Sophie." The name landed like a punch to the chest. "You're sure?" "She's been at the clinic a lot lately, dropping off coffee, laughing with Rachel in the hallway. I overheard her say something about clearing paperwork before the window closes." I didn't know what it meant, but after the vandalism, the threats, and now this, her voice cracked. "I had to tell you." I leaned back slowly. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own thoughts. Every warning, every whisper, every moment of hesitation in Sophie's smile suddenly came into focus. She wasn't just desperate for money. She was trying to remove obstacles, and Daniel, my husband, was one of them. "So what do we do?" Ava asked, voice shaking. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in days I felt something other than fear. I felt resolve. "We document everything," I said. "Every interaction, every dose, every shift Rachel works. We gather proof." Ava nodded quickly. "I can help. I can track the meds. I can talk to a couple of other interns, quietly. Some of them have noticed things too." "Can you trust them?" "I don't know yet, but I trust myself." She blinked hard and wiped her face with her sleeve. "I'm scared, Emma." "I know," I said. "Me too." We sat there for a long moment, the weight of it all settling around us like a fog. Then Ava looked up. "There's one more thing." I braced myself. I overheard Dr. Larson talking to Sophie on the phone. He didn't see me, but I was behind the supply shelf. He said, "Make sure she doesn't see the revised chart. We're too close to risk delays." "Revised chart?" I asked. Ava nodded. "Daniel's test results. They don't match the diagnosis anymore. But the official file was cleaned. The real version, it's locked in the restricted system." I exhaled slowly. So the lie went deeper than a corrupt nurse. It was systemic, premeditated. I looked at Ava, this trembling 19-year-old who had just thrown away her safety, maybe her future, to protect me. "You did the right thing," I said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I just didn't want to be part of something evil." I squeezed her hand across the table. She squeezed back. "I'll text you everything," she said. "Shift schedules, med logs, just be careful, Emma. You too." We walked out together but parted at the corner. She disappeared down the street, head down, shoulders tight. I watched her until she vanished. Then I turned toward the clinic. I didn't go in. Not yet. I stood across the street, just staring at it, at the glass doors, the beige walls, the place where Daniel lay sedated by the hands of people I had once trusted, people who were supposed to care, people who were using him as leverage. My phone buzzed again, blocked number, tick-tock, time's almost up. I didn't know if it was Rachel or Sophie or someone else entirely, but I knew one thing. They weren't just coming for Daniel. They were coming for everything. The hallway outside the clinic records room was dimmer than the others, like even the building itself wanted to forget what lived behind those doors. My fingers hovered over the key Ava had slipped into my hand earlier that day, still warm from her palm. I didn't breathe as I turned the lock. The door opened with a soft metallic groan. Inside, the air was dry and stale, tinged with dust and printer toner. Rows of filing cabinets and a humming server station filled the cramped space. No windows, no cameras, only secrets. I stepped inside, letting the door fall shut behind me. Each step echoed too loud, even though I was moving carefully. I could hear the fluorescent light overhead buzzing faintly, flickering slightly at the ends. The place felt suspended in time, like it hadn't changed since the 90s. I knew I had 10, maybe 15 minutes before someone started wondering where I'd gone. I moved quickly. Daniel's file was in drawer B4, right where Ava said it would be. I opened it and froze. There were 2 files. Same patient number, same name, 2 folders, one thick, one thin. I grabbed both, heart racing, and spread them across the tiny table in the corner. The first one, the official one, was clean. Recent scans, blood work, mild neurological decline, nothing unusual. The kind of file you show a worried spouse to reassure them. The second one, the restricted copy, was a different story. Dozens of flagged reports, drug logs with handwritten annotations, a chart labeled Symptom Acceleration Timeline that made my blood run cold. And then I saw the name, Dr. James Larson, initial authorization, Rachel Hayes, medication administrator. And beneath that, scrawled in the margin in looping blue ink, Sophie Bennett, directive confirmed, final clearance pending. My hand clamped around the folder like I could crush it. I stood there, heart pounding, every cell in my body screaming. She hadn't just been trying to drain Daniel. She was fast-tracking his decline. And the doctor, he wasn't just complicit, he was orchestrating it. I closed my eyes for a second, but the image of Daniel in that hospital bed, slack-jawed, barely blinking, flashed behind my eyelids. How long had this been going on? How close had I come to losing him, not to his illness, but to their manipulation? I took photos of everything, page after page. I didn't have time to make copies, just proof, something I could hold on to. As I reached the final section of the second file, a name I hadn't expected stopped me. Emma Carter, Estate Exposure Plan. My own name. My throat tightened as I scanned the page. Contingency plans for Carter's crumbs. Notes about asset redirection. Language like potential diminished capacity, probate setup, and advanced transfer scheduling. They weren't just trying to take Daniel from me. They were preparing to take everything. I staggered back a step. Suddenly, I could barely feel my legs. My knees buckled slightly, and I grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. They were going to claim I was unfit. That grief had made me unstable, that I couldn't manage my own business. And then, sweep it all into Sophie's name. Every recipe, every lease, every dollar. A sound from the hallway snapped me back to the moment. Footsteps, approaching, fast. I shoved both folders back, made sure the drawer was closed, and bolted for the back wall. There was another exit, one Ava had shown me on the map. Emergency use only. I pressed the crash bar. It didn't budge. Locked. The footsteps grew louder. I ducked behind a tall filing cabinet just as the main door clicked open. Rachel. She stepped in with a clipboard in hand, muttering to herself. Her heels clacked on the linoleum. She paused near drawer B4. I held my breath. She didn't open it. Instead, she turned toward the desk, flipped through a few documents, then pulled out her phone. I watched through the narrow gap between cabinets. Her voice was low, but I caught enough. No, she hasn't seen it yet. Ava? No, she's just a kid. She doesn't know anything. We're still on track. Yeah, Larson's locking the revised chart by Monday. Sophie said we push her then. Push me how? Push me where? Rachel looked over her shoulder suddenly. I pressed myself flat against the cold metal cabinet, barely breathing. A moment passed, then another. The door creaked shut behind her. I waited 30 seconds before moving. My body shook as I slipped out the side door Ava had warned me would stick. It did, but I forced it open anyway and disappeared down the stairwell. Outside, the air hit me like a slap. I staggered to the car, climbed in, and locked the doors. I sat there, gripping the wheel, too stunned to cry. This was bigger than I'd feared. Ava had risked her future to help me, and she had no idea what kind of people she was up against. And Sophie wasn't just sabotaging my marriage or scamming for money. She was systematically erasing us. Daniel, me, Carter's crumbs, all for herself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another unknown number, this time just one sentence. You're running out of time. The knock came right after sunset. I hadn't expected her to come in person, not after everything. But there she was, Sophie. Standing on my front porch like we were just neighbors catching up over iced tea. She wore a tan blazer over a silk blouse like she'd just walked out of a power lunch. Her lipstick was perfect, of course, the same blood-red shade she always chose when she wanted something. Behind her, the sky was turning the color of bruised plum, and the porch light flickered once before steadying. "May I come in?" she asked. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just stood there in the doorway, gripping the edge of the frame until my knuckles went white. "I won't take long," she added, her voice low, even. Against every instinct I had, I stepped aside. She walked in like she still knew where everything was, like she'd earned the right, but I wasn't the same woman I'd been 2 weeks ago. I followed her into the living room, silent. She turned and faced me. "Daniel's not doing well," she said softly. I stared at her. "That's what you came here to say?" Sophie tilted her head, eyes sharp beneath the softness. "You've been distant. I wanted to check in, see how you're coping." "I'm coping just fine," I said. She smiled gently, like I was a child pretending to play adult. "You've been under a lot of stress," she said. "The business, the clinic, the vandalism. It's understandable if things are slipping through the cracks." I flinched, just barely, but she saw it. She stepped closer, her heels silent on the rug. "I worry about you, Emma," she said. "And I worry about Daniel. If anything happened to you—" "Cut the act," I said, sharper than I meant. "You're not here to check in. You're here to manipulate me." Something flickered in her eyes, gone as quickly as it came. "I'm here to offer help," she said. "Real help. I spoke with Brad, and we're prepared to make you an offer." I didn't respond. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. I didn't take it. 30%, she said, setting it on the coffee table. "Ownership transfer of Carter's crumbs. You still keep the rest. We help manage things during difficult times. You get support, resources, legal protection." I stared at the envelope like it might explode. "And in return?" I asked. "You get to focus on Daniel, on healing, on rest. We take the stress off your plate." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You want me to sign over 1/3 of everything I built just because you say it's for my own good?" Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. "It's what Daniel would want." My breath caught. She knew exactly where to twist the knife. "You don't speak for him," I said. "He's slipping away, Emma. Everyone can see it. When the time comes, do you really want to be alone in all this?" "I'd rather be alone than manipulated." Sophie didn't flinch. Instead, she sighed, slow and theatrical, like she was tired of dealing with a difficult child. "You've always been proud," she said. "But pride doesn't pay for medical care. Pride doesn't run a business. It doesn't protect you when grief hits you like a freight train and you can't get out of bed." I walked past her, picked up the envelope, and held it in front of her. Then I tore it clean down the center. Her mouth tightened. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm correcting one." She picked up her bag. "Don't come here again," I added. "Not unless it's to confess." She didn't look back. As the door closed behind her, my knees nearly buckled. I stood there in the silence, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. That wasn't a visit. It was a warning. And if Sophie had shown her cards, it meant the clock was ticking faster than I thought. I moved to the kitchen, pulled out the file of photos I'd taken in the records room, and began organizing them. Every page, every signature, every altered chart. The folder was getting thicker, but it still wasn't enough. I needed one more piece, one that would tie all of them together. A sound broke the silence, a knock. I jolted. This time it was softer, uncertain. When I opened the door, Ava stood there, breathless. Her hair was damp from the evening drizzle, and she clutched a paper grocery bag to her chest like a shield. "Can I come in?" she asked. I nodded, moved aside. She set the bag on the table and pulled out a bundle of folded papers, her hands shaking. "Emma, I found something," she said. "Dr. Larson's private terminal. He left it logged in while he took a call. I printed everything I could before he came back." I took the papers with trembling hands. Detailed emails, memos, internal memos about dosage changes, notes on Daniel's response to unauthorized medication. One email subject line stopped me cold. "RE, Emma Carter, future medical review." "Larson's planning to question your stability," Ava whispered. "They're building a case that you're paranoid, overworked, erratic." I stared at the pages, bile rising in my throat. "They're going to say you're unfit to run the business," she said, "that Daniel's condition has pushed you over the edge." "They're trying to isolate me," I murmured. Ava nodded. "And they're almost there." I folded the pages, hands stiff, and looked Ava dead in the eyes. "Then we get ahead of them." "What do you mean?" "I mean we stop reacting." I walked to the kitchen drawer, pulled out a small black notebook. I'd been writing names in it, dates, notes. But tonight I added something new, Plan B. Because if they wanted war, they'd get it. I didn't sleep that night, not even a second. I lay awake in bed, the ceiling above me blurred by the streetlight slipping through my blinds. My fingers wouldn't stop twitching, an echo of something buried too deep to name. I kept replaying Sophie's visit, Ava's files, Larson's emails. They were going to take everything, unless I got ahead of them. By morning, my plan was clear. I would go to Sophie's office, pretend to take her deal, keep her talking, stall long enough to search her space. If she was coordinating this entire scheme, then there had to be something, anything, to tie it all together. And if I found it, then I'd stop playing defense. I pulled into the strip mall parking lot just after 9 a.m. Sophie's startup had one of those sleek, glass-fronted spaces wedged between a smoothie bar and a yoga studio. The kind of place designed for image, not substance. The blinds were half closed, but the lights were on. I took a deep breath, smoothed my coat, and walked in. She was behind the desk, phone in hand, legs crossed like always. She looked up, and something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. "Emma," she said, standing, "I wasn't expecting you." "I've had time to think." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "And?" "I want to talk through the agreement, in detail." Her smile returned. The professional one. Pleased, but not gloating. "Of course," she said, gesturing to the leather chairs across from her desk. "Have a seat." As she turned to grab the folder from a nearby cabinet, I glanced around. Glass walls, minimalist desk, 2 filing cabinets pushed into the far corner, under a mounted whiteboard covered in bullet points and sticky notes. I studied it fast, phrases like equity buy-in, Emma asset link, and LLC split. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Sophie returned with a thick folder. Brad cleaned up the language. "We figured we'd sweeten the terms. You're getting a good deal, Emma." I nodded like I believed her. As she opened the folder and started her pitch, I leaned in, but not to read. I was watching her hands, her posture, the way she glanced over her shoulder. She was nervous. Something was here. "I need water," I said, cutting her off. "Sorry, headache." She gestured toward the mini fridge in the back. "Help yourself." I crossed the room slowly, opened the fridge door, and with my other hand slid open the top drawer of her filing cabinet. Just a few folders inside, invoices, a rental agreement. Then one stuck out, older, thicker. No label. I pulled it halfway out and flipped it open. My blood ran cold. It wasn't contracts. It was a ledger. Handwritten. Names, dates, amounts. Columns titled Transfer, Source, and worst of all, Emma. Dozens of entries. My name, my business, even my property tax ID. They'd been siphoning money, laundering it through shell accounts tied to dummy businesses, Some had been active for over a year. I quickly snapped photos with my phone, heart hammering. Emma? I turned. Sophie was watching me. Her smile had vanished. Find what you needed? She asked, walking slowly toward me. I came for water, I replied, trying to steady my voice. But it was too late. The ledger was still in my hand. She stopped in front of me. You shouldn't have seen that. And Daniel shouldn't be drugged. We stared at each other. No more pretending. No more sugar-coated threats. Her tone dropped. You need to be careful, Emma. You think you understand the game, but you're late to it. We're already winning. My voice was low. You're stealing from me. No, she said. I'm reclaiming what was always meant for us. Brad and I gave up everything for that bakery. We were supposed to be partners. But you hoarded it, just like you hoard Daniel. You're sick, I whispered. You're weak, she snapped. And that's why this is happening. I backed away. I have what I need. Sophie didn't try to stop me. She just watched me go. Back in my car, I gasped like I'd been holding my breath for hours. My hands shook so hard I could barely unlock my phone. I sent the photos to Ava along with a text. Proof found. Everything leads back to her. 3 dots appeared. Then Ava's reply. You need to see what else I found. It's worse than we thought. The file Ava handed me was heavier than it looked. She'd wrapped it in a plain manila folder, rubber-banded 3 times over, as if that could contain what was inside. We sat in the back of the Willow Creek police station, in a room that smelled like paper and burnt coffee. Across from us, Detective Maria Quinn listened in silence, her notepad untouched. You're sure this is real? Quinn asked finally. I watched her upload it myself, Ava said, voice steadier than I expected. Dr. Larson's system. It wasn't encrypted. I flipped open the folder, even though I already knew what was inside. Bank transfers, shell corporations, medical overrides. But this new evidence, emails between Larson and someone named Kevin Walsh, brought everything into horrifying focus. It wasn't just about Daniel. This had always been about money. Quinn tapped her pen once. This Kevin Walsh, he's not local? No, I said. But the name's all over the ledger I found in Sophie's office. He structured the entire funnel. Quinn leaned back, her jaw tense. This is organized, not amateur stuff. They were preparing to frame me for fraud, I added, and have me declared unfit. And Daniel? They were drugging him, Ava whispered, to make Emma easier to isolate. The detective looked between us, then reached for her recorder. Let's do this officially. By the time we left the station, the sun had begun to drop behind the hills. The streets of Willow Creek glowed gold, but the warmth didn't reach me. I wasn't done. Sophie and Brad hadn't just tried to steal my business. They'd tried to erase me entirely. So I called in the only reinforcements I trusted, Clara, Ava, and Quinn. We met at Riverside Cafe after closing. Quinn brought in a blueprint of the place, laying it flat across the table. This corner booth, she said, pointing. You'll sit here. Brad and Sophie will come in thinking you're agreeing to their offer. You stall. I'll have a wire on you. Will they recognize it? I asked. Quinn smiled. It's embedded in a bracelet. You won't even notice it. Ava leaned over the map. I'll be at the counter. If they get aggressive, you won't do anything, Quinn cut in. We need them comfortable, talkative. I nodded slowly. And if they bring documents? Even better, Quinn said. Get them to admit intent, pressure, fraud, anything we can tie to the evidence you've provided. Outside, thunder rumbled far off, unexpected for August. I took it as a sign. The storm was coming, just not from the sky. The next day moved like molasses. I wore a navy dress, clean lines, no jewelry except the wire bracelet. Quinn double-checked the mic, then stepped back. You ready? She asked. I nodded once. Inside the cafe, Brad and Sophie were already seated. Sophie wore a pale pink blouse, softer, gentler than her usual armor. A performance. Brad looked like he hadn't slept, eyes sunken, hair unkempt in a way that wasn't stylish anymore. Emma, Sophie said brightly as I approached. We're so glad you came. I sat. Let's talk. Brad slid a document folder across the table. We updated the agreement, he said. You'll retain 40%. We just need signatures by Friday. Why Friday? Sophie's smile didn't waver. Paperwork alignment. You know how legal things go. I touched the folder but didn't open it. So this is all just about helping me? Of course, she said. You've been under enormous strain. I looked her dead in the eyes. Strain you created. She blinked just once. Emma. Daniel's not dying, I said calmly. He's being sedated. Brad stiffened. That's a serious accusation. And the documents you forged to backdate medical directives? I added. That's fraud. The pause that followed was delicious. Then Sophie recovered. I think you're overwhelmed. I leaned in. Say that again. Emma. Say I'm overwhelmed, I repeated. Say it loud enough for everyone here to hear. Sophie's mask cracked. You want to throw your life away for this? No, I said. I'm reclaiming it. Just then, Quinn and 2 officers approached from the back entrance. Brad turned pale. Sophie stood. You've been recording us? She hissed. Smile, I said. For the camera. Mrs. Carter, Quinn said. We'll take it from here. As they cuffed Brad, he stared at me like a man watching his house burn down. Sophie didn't fight. She just whispered something I couldn't hear as she passed me. Quinn leaned over. She said, It's not over. I nodded, because it wasn't. Ava came to my side, heart pounding. We got it, she said. Every word. Then her smile faded. But Emma? The emails between Sophie and Kevin? They mention another name. One you're not going to like. Who? Ava hesitated. Daniel. The name hit like a slap. Daniel. Ava's mouth moved again, saying something else, but I didn't hear it. My ears rang, my breath caught. Say it again, I whispered. She hesitated. His name was in the message log between Sophie and Kevin. It wasn't just once. It was throughout, from the beginning. I sat down hard on the bench outside the cafe, the evening breeze cold against my face. Daniel? The man I'd fought to protect, cried over, nearly bankrupted myself for, was part of it? My body trembled, but not from fear, from something worse, recognition. I thought back, months ago, how Daniel had insisted we let Sophie handle the expansion paperwork, how he pushed for that accountant Brad recommended, how he stopped attending board meetings, but always seemed to know what had happened in them. Was it grief clouding my judgment, or had he really been involved? I need proof, I said. Ava nodded slowly. Then we find it. She handed me a printed screenshot, one Ava had pulled from the clinic server. A draft email never sent, but auto-saved in Sophie's archive. To Daniel Carter. Subject, final revision. Kevin confirmed wire clearance. Once Emma is declared compromised, the power of attorney will pass without dispute. You'll be free. Free. That word kept repeating in my head. Free from what? From me? From the truth? My hands curled into fists around the page. The next morning I walked into Daniel's clinic room without knocking. The nurses had been instructed to leave us alone. Quinn had arranged that much. Daniel looked smaller than I remembered. Pale, drained, but his eyes were alert, and when he saw me, they narrowed. Emma, he said hoarsely, you look tired. I sat in the chair beside him, pulled out the photo of the draft email and set it gently on his tray. He stared at it, didn't blink, didn't ask. You knew, I said. You knew what Sophie and Brad were doing. You let them. He didn't answer. You helped them. Daniel shifted in the bed. You don't understand. No, I snapped. You don't. I built that bakery from scratch. I stood beside you through every doctor's appointment, every setback, every terrifying night. And while I was trying to save you, you were signing away my life behind my back. His hand twitched on the blanket. Why? A long silence, then quietly. I was scared. Of what? Of disappearing, he said. Of dying and leaving you everything, of watching you forget me. I stared at him, stunned. So you, what? Sold me out? To feel less replaceable? Daniel closed his eyes. They said it would be clean. That you'd still get most of it. That no one would get hurt. I laughed once, dry. Then they sedated you into a coma and tried to ruin my name. He looked at me, and I saw it, the crack behind the mask. He hadn't expected it to go this far. I didn't know, he said. I stood. You didn't want to know. Then I left, without another word. Outside, the air was thick with smoke from a nearby barbecue. It made my throat burn, or maybe that was something else rising. Rage, grief, all tangled up in the memory of the man I used to love. He wasn't dying. He was hiding. Quinn was waiting for me outside the cafe that night with a grim look. "Bad news," she said. "Sophie's out on bail. Someone wired in the full amount within minutes." "Who?" She handed me a bank printout. "Kevin Walsh." But what made my heart sink wasn't his name. It was the account he'd drawn from, a joint account under Daniel's name. He hadn't just helped them start this. He was still funding it. I turned to Quinn. "Can we freeze it?" "Already working on it." I nodded, jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Ava stepped beside me, voice quiet. "There's something else." I braced myself. "The pills Daniel's been taking, they're not all sedatives. Some increased dependency, physical and psychological." "You're saying they weren't keeping him sick. They were making sure he'd need them." "Even if he wanted out," I finished. "He couldn't," Ava said. My breath left me in one long exhale. So this wasn't just betrayal. It was blackmail, of the cruelest kind. I stared across the street where Carter's crumbs stood glowing against the night, warm, welcoming, mine. No matter what they did, they would never take it from me. But Daniel? That was a different kind of loss, and I wasn't ready for what came next. Rain tapped steadily against the window as I sat alone in Daniel's hospital room. The walls hummed with fluorescent light, casting everything in a sterile, too bright glow. Outside, the world was gray, unmoving, as if holding its breath. He looked asleep, but I knew better now. His eyes fluttered open the second I stood. I didn't speak, just held up the envelope Ava had handed me that morning. No name on it, just Daniel's handwriting on the back. "Do not read unless you have to." I crossed the room and set it on his chest. "You hid this," I said. Daniel didn't move. "You hid it knowing I'd find it only after you'd ruined everything." Still silence. My fingers curled into fists. "You almost got away with it." He turned his face away. That's when I opened it. The letter inside was short. Just a page, handwritten, slanted, uneven like it had been scribbled fast. "Emma, if you're reading this, then I failed to protect you. I didn't know how deep Sophie and Brad had gone until it was too late. They had something on me, something from years ago before I met you. I thought if I gave them what they wanted, they'd leave us alone, but I was wrong. I'm sorry, D." My throat burned. I looked up at him. "What did they have on you?" He blinked slowly. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It does to me," I said, "because I was the one standing in the line of fire while you stood behind the curtain." His voice cracked. "I was scared, Emma. You were always stronger." I swallowed hard. The pity I wanted to feel was gone. I reached into my bag and pulled out the thumb drive Ava had prepared. I placed it on his tray. "The police already have it," I said, "but I wanted you to see what truth looks like. Every account, every message, every plan Sophie made, with your silent blessing." He stared at it, didn't reach, didn't apologize again. And maybe that was the worst part. There was nothing left to say. I left the room and didn't look back. That night, I sat on the floor of my kitchen, a glass of wine untouched beside me. The windows fogged from the rain, and the scent of rosemary from the roast I forgot to serve lingered thick in the air. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was hollow. Ava texted, "You up?" I typed back, "Yes." A minute later, she knocked at the back door, already holding a box in her arms. "What's that?" I asked. She placed it on the kitchen table. "Mail from Sophie's storage unit. Quinn got access this morning." Inside were photos, letters, old files, mostly business-related, and then near the bottom, a smaller envelope, different handwriting. Ava tilted her head. "You recognize that?" I did. It was Daniel's mother's handwriting. I tore it open, heart racing. Inside, a birth certificate and a handwritten note. "Daniel, if you're reading this, then I never told you the truth. Emma Carter is not your wife by chance. She's the daughter of the man who nearly destroyed our family bakery years ago. Her father pushed mine into bankruptcy. You were too young to remember, but I never forgot. I thought keeping you apart would protect you. I never thought you'd marry her. Don't trust her. Don't trust her family. Mom." The room spun. My chair screeched as I backed away. Ava looked up at me, shocked. "What is it?" "My father," I whispered. "He died when I was 13. I never knew the full story, just that he'd been sued over a business deal and lost everything." I stared at the paper. "Daniel's family blamed mine." Ava's jaw clenched. "And Sophie? She knew this?" "She's the one who sent me to Daniel in the first place," I said. "That day we met, at the bakery, she arranged it." My heart pounded. It was never random. None of it. Sophie hadn't just betrayed me. She'd orchestrated the entire thing from the start, from love to ruin. And Daniel? He hadn't just been scared. He'd been groomed, used, maybe even chosen. I stood up slowly, hands trembling. "Where's Quinn now?" "She's at the clinic." "Then we need to go." "Why?" I looked out the window. The rain had stopped, because it was no longer just about clearing my name. It was about unearthing everything. The morning of the court hearing, Willow Creek felt unnaturally quiet, like the town was holding its breath for what came next. I sat alone in the cafe before sunrise, my hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug. The scent of burnt espresso clung to the air, and outside, the streets glistened with dew. Every corner of the shop held memories, laughter, flower dust, wedding cakes, arguments and whispers, all of it, ours. But that ours had long since dissolved. Quinn met me at the courthouse steps just after 8. "You ready?" she asked. I nodded. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it felt suffocating anyway. Sophie sat at the defense table, arms crossed, her hair pulled into a perfect twist. No sign of remorse, just calculation. Daniel was absent, still recovering in the hospital. And Brad, still negotiating his plea in another state. This moment was between me and her. The judge entered, gavel down. Proceedings began. Ava took the stand first, calm, clear, unstoppable. She laid out the trail of documents, bank transfers, and internal emails with surgical precision. Then came the surprise. Quinn turned in her seat and nodded, and Daniel was wheeled in. He looked older, like a man who'd lived a decade in the past 6 months. His hands shook as he was sworn in. When asked if Sophie had orchestrated the fraud with his knowledge, he hesitated, for one heartbeat too long. Then he said, "Yes." Sophie stiffened. "And did she pressure you to use your wife's medical state against her?" the prosecutor asked. Daniel stared straight ahead. "She didn't need to pressure me. I volunteered." A gasp somewhere in the room. I didn't move. "And why?" the prosecutor pressed. Daniel's voice cracked. "Because I thought she'd leave me. I thought Emma deserved better, and I hated that I agreed." I looked at him, but not with pity. Not anymore. Just understanding. The cold, quiet kind. The verdict came fast. Guilty on all major counts. Financial fraud, coercion, medical malpractice. Sophie would serve real time. Brad's deal kept him out of prison, but he'd lost everything: licenses, reputation, freedom of movement. Daniel, after testifying, checked himself into long-term psychiatric care, voluntarily. The judge granted me full ownership of the business, and my name, officially cleared. Afterward, I walked past Sophie as the bailiff led her away. She didn't speak, but her eyes said it all. She never thought I'd finish the fight. 3 weeks later, the bakery reopened. Same wood floors, same glass cases, but something was different. The light felt warmer, or maybe that was just me. Ava managed the books now. Clara returned to lead the kitchen staff. The customers came back, slow at first, then steady. They didn't ask questions, just smiled when they saw me behind the counter again. One afternoon, as I was frosting a cake, I found the old photo wedged behind the register, me and Daniel, the day we bought the space. We were covered in paint and smiling like idiots. I looked at it for a long time, then tucked it in the trash. Not because I was bitter, but because I no longer needed it. Later that night, I stood by the riverbank where Daniel and I once planned a second shop. I thought about his letter, his secrets, his shame, and somehow I felt peace. Because healing doesn't always mean rebuilding what was. Sometimes it's choosing to start again, without apology. We all carry ghosts, but not all of them get to follow us home. As I watched the last light flicker across the water, I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge, not regret, just a clean cut through the roots, and the freedom to grow somewhere else, Life will never be fair, but it will always reveal the truth eventually if you're willing to stand still and listen. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you felt something along the way, anger, empathy, curiosity, or even just a chill down your spine, please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment below. I've got more stories coming soon, and I'd love to see you back for the next one.